Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex, my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Today we want to kind of give an idea, a perspective scenario where the Giants obviously are set to let Dave Gettleman retire, and how this may unfold, right? How will they replace Dave Gettleman? What will that look like? Now, I have my opinion. I know Anthony has a bit of a different one, so I think it'll be a good, just not rather debate, but conversation to have about where the Giants are going to go with this general manager spot, because ultimately Dave Gettleman's tenure here has been just a complete and utter failure, right? The lack of a foundation built, the offensive line he promised us has not become anything more than a bottom five pass blocking unit. Andrew Thomas seems to be the only player that they really hit on, and that was after Joe Judge got there. So I think he had a big say in that. That was the first time Dave Gettleman has ever spent a first-round pick on an offensive lineman, right? So I think once Joe Judge got here, two things changed. Like immediately, right off the bat, the first two drafts after Joe Judge got here, Dave Gettleman did two things he's never done before in his entire career. He drafted an offensive lineman in the first round, and he traded back in the first round for the first time in his career. So those two things clearly had an impact by other factors, other voices, which I think Joe Judge did. Now, I think Joe Judge is actually a pretty damn good talent evaluator, maybe not a great head coach. I think he'd be a great head of talent, evaluation kind of guy, or maybe like a president of sorts, but maybe even a better GM than he is a head coach. But ultimately, I think the way the Giants are going to go with this kind of revolves around the retention of Joe Judge. Before we dive into, how I think this is going to unfold, and, Anthony may have a differing opinion here. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, and thank God, Dave Gettleman on his way out. We can all rejoice about that. I think even the biggest Dave Gettleman supporters throughout his tenure at this point have turned on him. I don't think anyone's a fan of this guy anymore. I mean, he's just burned all the bridges with the Giants. He made so many promises to the fan base that he was going to fix this, going to fix that. All of that has fallen through. He has not delivered on any of those promises. And you do make a pretty good evaluation of the change that the Giants have undergone in their front office since Joe Judge arrived. And I do think that's worth noting. But I think that's also worth noting when we look at the next general manager that comes to town, right? Because it seems like Joe Judge is safe. He's not going to lose his job. He's going to be the head coach next year. But how does that affect the new general manager? Because we agree, I think that, Joe Judge has a pretty good philosophy when it comes to drafting, and he's a pretty good talent evaluator, or at least he seems to have some pretty good say to sway the general manager and make the right selections. The drafts under Joe Judge have been better, maybe not good, but they've been better. So that's going to be interesting to see with the Giants likely retaining Joe Judge. How is that going to work out with a new general manager coming to town? How will those two work in tandem, and will that create a successful, winning, foundational piece for the Giants? I don't know. I mean, it's just really interesting to think about what that possibility will look like.
I mean, yeah, like the possibility of Joe Judge. I mean, like, look, everything in my opinion, everything revolves around Joe Judge right now, because as Joe said, ownership has been super supportive. Everyone's reporting that Joe Judge is going to be here another year. And with that in mind, I think that the most likely way the Giants approach replacing general manager is someone that's tied to the hip with Joe Judge, right? It's they're together, they're a pair, and if they both fail, they're both gone, which in my opinion means it's not going to be an outside hire. I don't think they're going to bring in somebody outside just to be with Joe Judge and get fired, right? I think it's going to be an inside hire. Maybe the guy Kyle O'Brien from the Detroit Lions, their executive of player personnel and talent valuation. I mean, anyone that comes from the Lions definitely doesn't exactly entice me, but he also has the New England roots that, John Mara is so desperately hanging on to try and, exploit and extract any little bit of value that Bill Belichick may have instilled in these guys. But ultimately, they're trying to get, the offspring of Bill Belichick. And there's no guarantee they'll ever be anything. I mean, look at Matt Patricia, didn't do anything. Look at, McDaniels, didn't do anything. These guys have just failed time and time again coming from New England, and Joe Judge is seemingly doing the same thing. He talks a lot, he talks a big game, says a lot the right things, but ultimately, like, we're 2 years in and he's still saying we're making progress, and we just got blown out against the Chargers, and they started their backup quarterback in the fourth quarter. Like, that does not indicate to me you're building a good culture. In fact, it tells me that you're building a losing culture. Honestly, I'd rather have these guys in the locker room just like getting angry, because this is not something they should be proud of. This is not something they should be happy about. They should be like holding each other accountable, maybe not going crazy like Landon Collins did on Eli Apple and his mom, but like at least be a little bit accountable and responsible for how bad they've been. Like, come out and say something. They're so like like they're just like, oh, they just let it go by. Oh, we're gonna get better. Oh, it's not that bad. And it's pissing me off because it doesn't show me much fight. Like, imagine if Justin Tuck or Michael Strahan was on this team, they would be going absolutely nuts to whip these guys into shape. Imagine Tom Brady was the quarterback of this team. He would be literally screaming in the faces of every individual player to get their shit together, because ultimately it comes down to leadership. And the Giants don't have what seems to be a bona fide outgoing leader. Like, I don't really see anybody on this team that's holding everybody accountable. Sure, Saquon Barkley is loved in the locker room, but that doesn't mean anything on the field. Leonard Williams, well respected, but he's also getting paid a shit ton of money. And I don't see him being that vocal leader. Logan Ryan may be that leader, but he's not a guy that's going to hold somebody accountable, it seems. He's more of a guy that's going to, bring people together and not hold them accountable for their actions. So, like, they need somebody that's just intense. And I think they lack that to a degree. But, heading back to the general manager position, I think that Joe Judge will probably hire somebody from within. It could be Kevin Abrams for all we know. It could be any of these guys. But ultimately, if they do pair somebody with Joe Judge, I think it's going to be somebody already within the organization who knows what Joe Judge is looking to do. I just don't think Dave Gettleman and Judge actually have good chemistry together. I think Dave Gettleman has an entirely different idea of how this team is supposed to be built. Overspending on interior defensive linemen, overspending at receiver. When's the last time you ever saw a Patriots team overspend at wide receiver? I don't think I've ever seen them spend big dollars at wide receiver. I mean, they spend money on Nelson Aguilar, and he's not doing much this year. So, like, you see what they actually do is they have leaders. They have guys like on their team that really hold everything together and are intense, and really bring all the players and take them to a higher level. And ultimately, it comes down to coaching as well, Anthony. But in my opinion, the way they're going to go about this, it's going to be hire someone from within, pair them with Joe Judge. And if they fail together. They've already been on the roster. They've already been with the organization for a year or 2 years. And then it's easy to fire both of them and hit the restart button with a decent foundation. But bringing in an outside guy doesn't seem like, a lot of people will say Louis Riddick and this and that. But you bring in Louis Riddick, if you hear him talk, if you hear the way that he wants to build a team, it's exactly the opposite of what Joe Judge is doing. It's exactly the opposite. So if you're going to keep Joe Judge, why would you bring in a guy like Louis Riddick who's going to want to do the exact opposite? That's a recipe for disaster, right? Legitimately, you're bringing in ingredients that do not mesh well together. So it's like putting ketchup on steak. It doesn't make any sense. So Anthony, when you're looking at the scenario I just laid out for you, do you think that makes sense?
So, no, it doesn't make sense, but I think that the Giants are going to go with an outside hire. You're pretty confident they're going to go with a guy inside. I don't think so. I think they are going to go with an outside hire. And one of the reasons why is, when you hire this general manager, this is something that Rex Ryan said recently on television. He said they can hire whoever they want because that guy can come in, and if he's tied to Joe Judge for a year, that's okay, but he can fire the guy the next year. If they say you have to work with Joe Judge for this year and give him a chance, the general manager can say, okay, but if he doesn't meet these standards, he's fired after this season, and I will find my own head coach, a new head coach. It's not really a lot of Giants fans are saying if they keep Joe Judge, they're shortening their list of potential general manager candidates, right? I don't think that's necessarily true because a general manager has the power to fire a head coach. Sure, they might have to deal with the Joe Judge for 1 year, but after that, it is the general manager's job to evaluate how the coaches perform and then fire the coaches. Joe Judge is not hiring the general manager. That's kind of the misconception that people have. People think that Joe Judge is going to have a huge say in the general manager selection. He's basically going to pick the guy that he's working with. Not a chance. There's no way that that's possible. Okay, it's going to be they're going to find the best general manager candidate that they feel they can find. They're going to hire him, and they're going to tell him, you get 1 year with Joe Judge. If you don't like it, you fire him, you restart, and you build this team exactly as you would like it to be built. And I think that's a great way for the Giants to go about this. Sure, maybe they should hire a general manager and give him the autonomy to fire Joe Judge this offseason, but it's a little bit too late because Joe Judge has all the player evals on the specific players that we have on the team. He has, a lot of film on those guys. He has a lot of already understanding of what the scouts in the department want to go after in the draft. They're already doing pre-draft prep. That is a thing. The scouts are already doing this. So having Joe Judge on board gives the general manager a little bit of a head start on some of those things, a little bit of a head start on the evaluation of the current roster, a little bit of a head start on the evaluation of the upcoming draft class because of this Joe Judge's coaching staff and scouting staff still being in place. So I think that's a little bit important for the general manager to consider. I don't think that it's as bad as people are making it out to be if the general manager is hired and Joe Judge is retained, because those two can work together for this year. They have a head start if they do that. The general manager will get a head start if they do that. And if it doesn't work out after a year, then they can fire Joe Judge, let the general manager pick his head coach and go forward, new beginnings. It's all over it with Joe Judge, and it's a happy ending in my opinion. So I think that Rex Ryan was right when he said that. I agree with that kind of way of thinking. I don't think the Giants are going with an inside hire. Pretty much every report that I've seen about this Dave Gettleman firing and this Giants, going in a new direction, I've seen that they're going outside of the box. They're not going to go with someone inside of the building, which thank God. Now, of course, those reports could be wrong. Maybe they do go ahead with somebody inside the building. I sure hope not. I really hope not. But to Alex's point, if they go with somebody inside the building, it's kind of like you're giving them a 1-year extension. You're saying you get a year to do this job, and then we can fire you at the end of the year. You can kind of like tell them it's a 1-year job, or if you do successful, then you get an extension. But I don't really know if that would work out too well either, because usually front office position members want the long-term security. But like I said, I think they're going with an outside hire. I think they should go with an outside hire, and I think that it would work just fine because you give it 1 year with Joe Judge. If it doesn't work out, you move on and you make something new.
I disagree with that for one big reason. If you go and hire somebody that's outside and they have different ideologies and perspectives of how a team should be built, you're setting up Joe Judge to fail again. You know what I mean? Like, he's the head coach. If you don't give him the pieces that he wants, it's only going to be bad for him. Like, he's going to go out and find an offensive coordinator that he wants. Like, they're going to give him that autonomy. They're not going to bring in a new GM and say, hey, GM, you go find an offensive coordinator. You go find a new coach, whatever it might be. I think that the ideal scenario here is your head coach and general manager need to be in alignment always, no matter if he's 1 year from being fired or he's brand new. Like, they always have to be in alignment. So I think that if you're going to keep Joe Judge, and if it's going to be an outside hire, it's going to be someone that Joe Judge wants. And it's like, and if Joe Judge can convince them, maybe he elevates somebody from another job and says, you get a year of general manager experience, then you can move somewhere else. Maybe you can make the jump or whatever. So it's good for your resume nonetheless. Or alternatively, he's like, hey, I believe in this team. He sells them the fact that I believe in this team. We have all this draft capital. We've killed the last two drafts. And personally, I actually do think they've really done a really good job the last two drafts. Looking at the talent they've actually got and the value, I think you would agree that mostly Andrew Thomas, Xavier McKinney, Azeez Ojulari, Kadarius Toney's a monster when he's healthy, and the extra first-round pick. I'd say those 4 or 5 picks alone, those 4 or 5 decisions were absolute home runs on paper, and in some of them on the field as well. I mean, Andrew Thomas and Xavier McKinney are playing at Pro Bowl levels this year. So I'll say this. I think that you give Joe Judge this extra year, and if he was fired, don't get me wrong, I'd be okay with it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm like, oh no, Joe Judge is fired, because he's been awful as a head coach. I'm not saying that would piss me off, but it seems like he's going to be kept. So we have to start thinking about how can they maximize him for one more year, because they still think he can win, and I think that it ultimately boils down to, if they really believe he's going to win, they're going to have to give him the leverage and the autonomy to say, I want this general manager because I know that this guy's going to come in and he's going to help me make the right choices for our team in terms of drafting and free agency, because we have to create cap. And the thing is, Kevin Abrams knows the cap, right? Kevin Abrams knows all the stuff that's happening. He knows the contract setup. If you bring in somebody new, if you fire Kevin Abrams and bring in somebody new to manage the cap space, you're talking about a pretty significant difference, right? They're going to have to learn everything, and they're going to have to see all the contracts, all the jargon that Kevin Abrams actually built. So I highly doubt Kevin Abrams is going to be fired. I highly doubt it. If anything, he either stays in his role now or he gets promoted, and basically, and him being promoted might not be the worst thing in the world, and hear me out, because he's not going to dabble in the player evaluations. He's only going to do what needs to be done with the money. And at a certain point, I kind of like that, because a new general manager coming in and having a different, ideology about where the team should go, how it should be built, may be bad. Like, Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge seem to be on 2 entirely different pages, and it's completely destroyed this team. Kevin Abrams is purely a money guy. If you promote him, it's just optics. It's just a name. It's just, he's called the general manager, but he's not actually doing any talent valuation. He's more or less the money guy. And if Joe Judge is like, I want to go get that guy and I want this guy, he'll be like, okay, I'll get it done for you. I'll figure out the money. That's it. So that's what that would look like if Kevin Abrams was the general manager. However, like, do I want that to happen? No, I don't want that to happen. I want Kevin Abrams to be the general manager. I'm just saying that's what the reality would be like if it did happen. What are you thinking about, I guess that scenario in general?
Yeah, I don't really like that too much because I do want a good talent evaluator to step into the general manager position. I like the fact that Kevin Abrams is so good with money, but is he really? Like, I like that he's a money guy, but he's not the best with money. I mean, sure, you can blame it on Dave Gettleman's frivolous spending, that the Giants have such bad salary cap space, but part of that's Kevin Abrams. He helped with the money, he helped with the contracts, and the Giants have $3.5 million to spend in free agency this offseason. So part of that has to be Kevin Abrams, not being the best money guy in the world. And like I said, I want a good talent evaluator. Kevin Abrams is not going to pick up the phone when a star player goes on the trade block and make a deal. He's just not going to do that. I want a general manager that can make a deal. If they're the Giants, give it 2 years, we're in a win now position, right? Say we're in a win now position in 2 years, although it's probably realistically more like 3 to 4 to 5 years. Say we're in the win now position and there's a great player who's coming off of an injury, like Stephon Gilmore earlier this year when he got traded to the Panthers for a very low price. If the Giants were in position to make that deal, they needed a corner that could have sent them to the next, phase and make them an elite team. I want a general manager that can pick up the phone, call the Patriots, and make that deal. Kevin Abrams is not doing that. But if we get a better general manager, a really good, esteemed general manager who can get some credibility and respect, he might be able to make that deal and push the Giants into Super Bowl contention. So that's important for me. I don't want just a strictly money guy like Kevin Abrams. I don't think he's been that great as a money guy either way. So I hope that the Giants go with an out-of-the-box hire, someone outside of the building. Again, I want something new. I want to refresh. I want to restart. I don't want anything that's been in place for the past 5 years, right? So I just want completely new from the front office. That's why I want to bring in someone from the outside because I can't continue to deal with the way that the Giants have been operating in recent years.
Yeah, and to wrap this video up, this is if I was a betting man, and I do dabble in betting sometimes, but if I was a high-profile betting man, I'd put my money in on Kyle O'Brien, and I'll tell you why. First of all, he freaking looks like a general manager. Go look at his page on the JohnGiants.com, Anthony. You'll see him. The guy looks like a general manager, straight up. And here's his biography, right? Kyle O'Brien, who has 2 decades of scouting and personnel experience in the NFL, joined the Giants front office this year in the newly created position of senior personnel executive, right? So they created a position for him, which is definitely interesting because it kind of has like a lot of leeway. Like he could be promoted to any level. Nobody knows really where he is in the hierarchy of this system. And I believe he kind of could make that move to general manager quite seamlessly because he's very much in line with what Joe Judge wants because he helped hire him. And basically, he has worked in player personnel for 4 different teams in capacities that cover both pro and college scouting. So he has a lot of connections. He has a lot of pro and college scouting experience. He is very much in line with what Joe Judge wants to do. And if you give a guy like him more power and more alignment with Joe Judge in terms of how they want to approach building this team, I think we're actually going to see more success than Dave Gettleman. I think Kyle O'Brien will be a better general manager than Dave Gettleman. But again, if they fail, it's a duo. Like, I think that's the best way to go about it. You can't have a holdover general manager, right? So, okay, theoretically, like this is my last point, and then we'll wrap it up. But basically, how I feel is you have 2 guys. If they don't pan out, they were already in the organization, so it's easy to get rid of them, right? You can just, okay, you're done, you're fired. You've already been here for a couple of years. You didn't pan out. You go fresh, right? You hire a general manager. The general manager finds the head coach that they want. And those 2 guys align and they have a ton of draft capital, right? Because your team's probably, if those 2 guys are fired, you have to imagine your team's probably shit again, right? You're probably having another top 10 pick. And let's say they draft back in this draft and they get some more draft capital and they have a lot of assets they can trade up, maybe get a quarterback. A new GM is very much in love with the prospect of all this draft capital. They have 9 picks this year, 2 of them being top 10 picks, one of them probably being top 5. There's a lot to like. And a lot of foundational pieces. Andrew Thomas, foundational piece. Xavier McKinney, foundational piece. Kadarius Toney, Azeez Ojulari. I like Aaron Robinson. There's a ton of really good players, young players that have a future with this team. And then this upcoming draft, who knows? Maybe they hit it out of the park. They get Evan Neal, they get Ekwonu, and out of NC State, the tackle. Maybe they get Linderbaum, and your offensive line is looking a lot better. You still have a couple guys on contract you can retain. Adoree Jackson, you still have Leonard Williams on contract. There's an out. And then that's the best part of it. I think they set this up so that after this upcoming season, if they do fire these guys, all of those big contracts have outs in them. So you can cut half of those big guys and just overhaul them, like use the draft to hit the restart button. It's planned out perfectly to hit restart after Daniel Jones's rookie deal ends. If they pick up that 5th-year option, of course, that's a conversation for another day. But if I was a betting man, I look at Kyle O'Brien and say he seems like the most obvious choice here because he's aligned with Joe Judge. Would I like it? No. I would like the Giants to be good and have this figured out, but ultimately this is where we are, and I'm being realistic here and saying that Kyle O'Brien seems like the best name to me, Anthony. Do you have any last words before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a betting man, I think you're losing that bet, personally. I think that I would be willing to bet that the Giants are going with an outside hire. And one of the reasons why is because John Mara needs a safe face right now. If he goes with an inside hire, he knows what the fan reaction is going to be. He knows he'll get way too much pushback, way too much criticism. And the Giants honestly can't afford to get any more criticism from their fan base at this point. A lot of fans are canceling season tickets. They're checking out. They're not watching games anymore. They stopped going to the games. The Giants need to make a serious change, one that excites the fan base. And they've done a couple things recently that have excited the fan base. The trade down in the draft, the signing of Kenny Golladay. Sure, maybe those things right now are not looking like, the best endeavors, but they really excited the fan base. It got the fan base back on board when they did it. Joe Judge got the fan base back on board when he was hired. That's what the Giants are looking at right now. That's what John Mara is looking at. So I think he's going with an outside hire that excites the fan base and gets us reinvested in the team, because ultimately that's what he needs. John Mara personally needs to reinvest the fan base into this team. So that's why I think he's going to go with an outside hire at the end of the day.
I mean, I get that, but I don't even think he cares about packing the stadium. Like, he makes $1 billion off the TV deals, and the TV deals are expected to freaking skyrocket in revenue next year. So that's why they're increasing the cap $30 million. So personally, I don't think he gives a shit about the fans. I think he's like, it's a business. Like, he's like, I'm making $1 billion even if you guys don't show up. And ultimately, if Kyle O'Brien, they hire him, there'll be public backlash, no doubt, for the first couple weeks. But if they go out in the draft and they knock it out of the park, everyone's going to get excited nonetheless. They're going to say, Kadarius Toney's healthy, Kenny Galladay's healthy. We still got Saquon because we couldn't trade him. Our defense is still good. We had some money. We went out and bolstered the offensive line with some free agency picks. We got another pass right. People will find ways to get excited. The draft will look good on paper. It always does. We always get excited. Oh, look who we got. Look at this guy. And oftentimes, more than not, the last 4 years, they haven't panned out. But the last 2 years, I think they have panned out in the first round. They've done a good job. So I think Joe Judge, and I'm pretty confident he will do a good job in the draft. He just isn't a great head coach. And there's a big difference there. He's a better scout than he is a head coach. And the Senior Bowl, there's a lot of really good players. We recorded that video yesterday about Desmond Ridder. He's another Senior Bowl guy at University of Cincinnati. We're going to see him play. And I know they love Senior Bowl guys, but without Dave Gettleman there, maybe they don't prefer to just rely on the Senior Bowl to get all their players. They're obviously older coming into the Senior Bowl than any other guy. But ultimately, this is an interesting conversation to have. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the YouTube comments below. I know this is it's really coming actually pretty close. They're expecting Dave Gettleman to probably, the second the Giants are done this season, within a week or two, he's probably going to be retiring, so it's going to move quickly. The second this season is over, it's going to move pretty fast. You're going to see a lot of moves, but the Giants could just elevate a guy from within, like from day one, and then bam, they could announce it at the same time he retires. They're probably already having those conversations, right? They're probably already saying, if we have someone in interior that can replace him and we're keeping Joe Judge, we'll just announce it at the same time. So we'll see what happens, guys. Love to hear your comments below who you think will become the general manager. But again, I think it's going to be Kyle O'Brien. I could definitely be wrong. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But make sure to like and subscribe to the video below. As always, my friends, much appreciated for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants video.